Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to see y'all. Very important group that have gathered today. I'm Katie Dempsey, and Chairman Unterman is here also representing the Senate, and we appreciate y'all pausing in this day for us to have this very, very important conversation. Before we get started, I'd like to ask Chairman Epps to give us a word of prayer.
Would you join me in prayer? Our eternal and gracious God, we thank you for this day. And thank you for this state and this government and every family that's represented in this room. And as we proceed with the affairs of this committee work, we ask you just to wrap your arms around each and every one. Give us the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to move forward in a way that's beneficial for the citizens of this state. Continue to shower us with your blessings. We petition this in the name of your Holy Son. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you. Well, I know y'all's time is precious, as is everyone's, so why don't we just go ahead and get started right away. The first person, I think, to talk to us will be from the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. And while they're coming up, I want to tell y'all that we, Representative Kirby is not here with us, but he had put forward a resolution to once again open up and look at IPSI and the programs. We had a study committee on this several years ago and decided that maybe we could handle it in this way, to have a few times when we would come together this summer and fall and try to see what we can do to address the very important needs, I feel, and I think most of everyone on the committee, because many were there at least when we did our study committee previously, but to realize that we've taken such big steps forward and to make sure that we continue to make those big steps to allow those who wish to avail themselves of education and work opportunities still have that. So, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and then get started for us. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Madams Chairman, Chairwomen, members of the committee. I'm Eric Jacobson. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities, and I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to tell you the story of the inclusive post-secondary education program here in Georgia. And I would like to make one request if possible, and that is that because all three programs are going to give a presentation, we were wondering if you could wait to ask questions at the end of all three programs, just because I think we'll give you a broader perspective of what's happening, and that might give you all the answers that you might need. We know you might have some questions individually, but if you can, just to wait until all three programs are finished.
Well, what if we do this? What if we do that and then we ask representatives from each to come sit at the table afterwards, and we will do the question.
That would be fine. That would be fine. So I want you to think about your own story, or maybe your story of your children, and how you made the decision early in your life or in your child's life about what you were going to do in terms of going to college, and how you saved, or your parents saved for you to go to college, and you put that money away. I know I did. I was the first child in my family to go to college, and my mom saved. She was a single mom. She saved every penny, extra penny she could to help me go. And then when I had my children, I saved like crazy to make sure that we had the money necessary to send our children to college as well. And that took a long time. But now I want you to think about and change that story just a little. So suppose you had a child who was born with an intellectual or developmental disability, and throughout their K-12 experience, you were told by your teachers, by the doctors, by the counselors that you met and were involved with, that once they were graduating from school, that the best scenario that they might have is that they would get a job, that they might live on their own, but there was never a mention of post-secondary education of any kind. There was never a mention of going to college of any kind. So you never started thinking about saving money or putting it aside to go to college because you didn't expect this to be an option. And for most families of kids with intellectual or developmental disabilities in the state of Georgia, this was what was happening in Georgia until about 2009 here. A couple of years before that, I was sitting around a kitchen table with some parents, and they were dreaming. They were dreaming that maybe college should be an option for their children with developmental disabilities. They were expressing sorrow that they didn't have a post-secondary program or a post-secondary option for their children. A few meetings around the state, and a couple of years later, a program emerged at Kennesaw State University, and the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities provided about $25,000, and a couple of students enrolled, and we had our first inclusive post-secondary program here in Georgia, 2009. Today, let me see. I can't see that far, so you're going to have to tell me if that's what it says on that board over there. Today, there are 9 programs with 138 students enrolled and a total budget of over $3 million. So we went from 2 students in 2009, $25,000 at Kennesaw State University, to 9 programs, 138 students, and a budget of a little past $3 million. I think that's some tremendous growth in really a very short period of time. That group of parents and students and providers and teachers who came together had a vision of creating a network of colleges and university programs that provide students with intellectual and developmental disabilities with the opportunity and benefits of higher education to gain the education and skills they need to lead increasingly independent lives, to pursue careers of their choice, and to provide the potential to increase their earnings in the long term. Those parents really saw inclusive post-secondary education programs as a way of improving their children's lives so they could get better jobs than what was available to them at that time, to increase their independent living skills, to get them out of the house and not living under their roofs, and to increase their social skills as well, to allow them to live the same lives that their other children were living who were going off to school. I still remember hearing a student from one of Kennesaw's first cohorts talking about what it was like being away for the first time, like being treated like all the other adult students on that campus, about having the same expectation that the other students had, being on time to class, to being sitting in class, to being treated exactly like how all the other students were, to being said, I don't have to listen to my mom and dad anymore. Well, he still had to listen to mom and dad, but not the same way that he had to before. He was glad to be out of mom and dad's home. The students who enroll in the IPSI program graduate from high school without a traditional diploma, meaning they're unable to enroll as a traditional college student, and sometimes even a traditional technical college student. Nationally, 95% of IPSI students have intellectual disabilities or autism. Nearly 62% are male and 62% are white. Let me tell you that GCDD never anticipated being in this room with you right now talking to legislators about an appropriations for the IPSI program when it began in 2009. We had been steadily increasing our federal support. We're a federally funded agency. We had steadily been increasing our federal support to Kennesaw State University, providing a small grant to East Georgia College and some small funds to Georgia Tech. I went to a meeting and some advocates suggested that we go to the legislature and ask for an allocation. But we had never asked for money to support any of our programs that we funded or operated. Instead, as many of you know, we've always come to you to talk about the waiting list and how do we make sure the waiting list funded through the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities or Department of Community Health, but not for any programs that we have funded. But in 2014, you appropriated $100,000 to us to support the IPSI program. And in 2015, you increased it to $200,000. That remained steady through 2017. We were using these funds to supplement our federal dollars at Kennesaw State University, East Georgia, and Georgia Tech. These funds were used to provide exploratory funds at places like Columbus State to determine if they even wanted to have a program, and to help the Georgia Consortium to get off the ground and to support these new and emerging programs. In 2018, I got a phone call, and I was asked about increasing that appropriations to $500,000 and to move that money to the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency and to give us $25,000 of that money to keep us involved. By the way, we've used that $25,000 to create a marketing program for the IPSI program as well. So we've been trying to educate parents, teachers, and others about the potential of IPSI and to increase the enrollment in IPSI programs around the state. Let me be really clear. I was very happy about this move. And I've told members of our council and people around the state just this. In fact, this is the very idea of DD councils around the country. We seed programs. We get things started off the ground, and then we hand it over to the system to really operate over the long term. We started out with a $25,000 allocation to Kennesaw State to get it started, and then we were ready to give it over to GVRA with the $500,000 to draw down those federal dollars and grow that network of 9 schools, grow it into more, and increase the number of students that were already in the pipeline. I could not have imagined then what happened beginning in the fall of last year when I began receiving calls from colleges and universities that were already beginning to freak out about what was happening when they were unable to receive their money. Hearing about how the Federal Rehab Services Administration didn't think that IPSI may be an appropriate use of federal dollars, and other issues were being raised during the school year. All this then leading to a decision by you last year to move the money back to GCDD, which means now we're unable to access those matching dollars from the federal government, which puts us in another precarious position. Finally, working with the Center for Leadership and Disability, who you'll hear from next, we've devised a formula based on programs and based on the number of students to distribute that $500,000 to the universities. We're using these funds to support both programs and to support students, and you can see the numbers up here on the board. I can tell you that we'll be asking for additional funds to support each of these schools to have at least one academic transition teacher. Each school did, or many of the schools did have an academic transition teacher, but these funds that were provided by both the Department of Education and GVRA have lost those teachers, and the decision was made to move those teachers to the high school level. The cost is approximately $100,000 for the academic transition teachers, and we'll need at least 9 new teachers. Later this week, I have to submit a transition report to OPP that details our accomplishments under Governor Deal to the next governor. I'll proudly hold up the IPSI program as a major accomplishment for GCDD and the state of Georgia, because our collective efforts have resulted in over 150 students who never have thought about going to college having the opportunity, and for many of those now having a career, are living independently, and have a life that was never imagined for them, and we all help make that happen. So I want to thank you again for your support. This is the beginning of the story, and I'm now ready to pass it on to your next speaker.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a presentation from the Georgia Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Consortium.
I have found I'm of the age now where if I stand and look quizzically at the machine, then someone will come to offer me assistance.
I'll remember that.
Yeah, I work on Mac, but that's not what would make a difference here. So thank you so much to the members of the committee, and I have a written testimony that is in a package that's been provided to you, but for the sake of time, I didn't want to go through all of those words, and I certainly didn't want to read it for you. So I have a slide presentation that is supplemented, essentially. That supplements the written material in your packet, and I will walk through that and talk about that, I think, to give you the overview. So my name is Daniel Crimmins. I am a professor of public health at Georgia State University, and I am honored to be here today. I am one person. I am not a consortium by myself, and so the consortium is an activity of the Center for Leadership and Disability, and we, too, receive federal funds as a University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Big, long title, but that comes with a mission that says, how do you take the good ideas and good work that are in our field, and how do you make sure that they are spread throughout your state? And so there's at least one UCED, UCEDD in every state and territory. Georgia has two. The other are our colleagues at the Institute for Human Development and Disability at University of Georgia. So I will tell you that this idea of inclusive post-secondary education, I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I am one of the people that early in my training, that is one of the few things I feel shame about, is that I told people not to expect their children to go to college when fortunately this was 30 or 40 years ago. I now have had the experience of seeing children, young people with intellectual disabilities go to universities and blossom. And I think it's one of the most exciting things that I have seen in my work over actually more than 40 years at this point. So thinking about college as a possibility is one of the things that we certainly want to encourage. I haven't included the photographs in your handouts, in your slides, just they're here for sort of ornamentation, but we are really here to talk about, I want to say that underneath everything we're talking about is the students that are in the programs. And so there's different group shots, and here's a candid shot with hats a-flying at graduation. I forget what they call them. Graduation mortarboards, yes. This idea of an idea whose time has come. There are now more than 250 inclusive post-secondary programs in the United States. Sure, I'll pause for a moment.